In today's video, we have some trade talk around the Montreal Canadiens, Calgary Flames, Boston Bruins, as well as some updates on Jacob Chychrun. Might he be willing to accept deals to different teams that we hadn't discussed before? We have a ton of players on waivers, over 40 to be exact, plus more cuts have been made, players sent back to junior, injuries, signings, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of stuff to go over here today. We have a huge list of NHL players on waivers, which we'll go over momentarily, and then a whole bunch of other stuff, including a few trade rumors I wanted to discuss here today. So as I mentioned, we have 40 plus players on waivers today. I've been talking the last few days that this is expected as NHL rosters make their cuts and send players to the minors. A lot of these players have enough pro experience that they do require waivers to be sent down, so it's not a huge shocker. And as each day goes by and another group of players goes through this process, you're bound to see probably a few more higher quality players be in that group, which could end up getting picked up. We've had one waiver claim so far. All the players we talked about yesterday that were on waivers did in fact clear, so there were no claims announced here today. But we did find out, like I said, over 40 players. Let's go through this one team at a time. Of course, the Anaheim Ducks have Daniel Reagan and Austin Strand. The Buffalo Sabres have Malcolm Subban. The Hurricanes have William Lagesson. The Calgary Flames have Clark Bishop, Oscar Dance, Nick DeSimone, Ben Jones, Colton Poolman, and Matthew Phillips. Now, I know Matthew Phillips is a player who's still kind of in that prospect category, getting a little bit older now. And I know there's a lot of fans that support this player and wanted to see him get more opportunity. At least I've seen a fair bit of it on social media here during the preseason and training camp so far. There are some that think that under Daryl Sutter, Matthew Phillips probably isn't going to get much of an opportunity. And it might actually be, it might be sad for Flames fans that support this kid. But at the same time, it might be best for his career if he get picked up on waivers. He might get more of a chance to play in another organization. But we'll see. He's one of the names that I would put as a maybe for players that we might see get picked up here. The Dallas Stars have Marian Studnik, Riley Tufte, and Alex Petrovic. The Edmonton Oilers have a veteran Greg McKegg. The Florida Panthers have Anthony Bitetto and Zach Dalpe. The LA Kings have Frederick Allred. The Ottawa Senators have Rourke Cloutier, Jacob Lucchini, and Dylan Hetherington. The Pittsburgh Penguins have Radim Zohorna, Dustin Tokarski, Xavier Ouellet, Alex Nylander, and Drake Caggiula. Now, at one point earlier in the preseason, it might be looking like Caggiula might actually survive and maybe have a shot at the NHL roster, but that has come to a close. So a player like him who's got more NHL experience, maybe a Dustin Tokarski as a depth goaltender, perhaps might get a look. We'll see. The Seattle Kraken have a large group here, including Jesper Froden, Cam Hughes, Cole Lynn, Max McCormick, Gustav Olofsson, Austin Paganski, Brogan Rafferty, Magnus Hellberg, and Carson Twarynski. We also have a few from the Washington Capitals organization, including Beck Malenstein, Garrett Pilon, Gabriel Carlson, Dylan McElrath, goalie Zach Fucale, and Bobby Nardella. The St. Louis Blues also have defenseman Will Bitton. So to me, there's about maybe 3 to 4 players that I'd put as a maybe. There's really nothing here that's a sure thing. I would say defenseman Will Bitton in St. Louis is a maybe. Zach Fucale and Dustin Tokarski kind of might get some attention as a depth goaltender. Not really sold on that, but maybe Drake Caggiula. But otherwise, in Matthew Phillips. Other than that, I expect pretty well everybody to clear. Time will tell, though. We might have a surprise or two in there. We'll find out at noon Eastern time tomorrow, and we're going to continue to see, a high amount of players on waivers until all these rosters are cut down. So we'll see. Obviously, there's 32 teams. They usually start their preseason training camp rosters around, anywhere really from 50, 60, 70 players, and obviously got to get down to a 23-man roster. So there's bound to be a large quantity of this. Obviously, younger players that are still in their rookie contracts don't usually need it, but once they gain a bit more experience, they do. So we'll see. Now, there are some notable players, you could say, that were sent down either back to junior or to the minor leagues. Some notable prospects. There was a lot of players. I mean, I can't go through all of them. We'd be here all day. But the Calgary Flames have demoted Connor Zary and Jacob Pelletier. It's unfortunate. I really thought this might be the year Pelletier grabs a spot. But all indications there, based on a little bit that I've seen and what Calgary media is saying, is that Pelletier really hasn't been overly impressive this training camp and offseason, preseason, so far. So I think there was an opportunity for him there. They have a spot in the top 9, which is why they have Sonny Milano on a PTO. And he wasn't able to seize it. I'm kind of surprised. I thought Connor Zary might be one of those potential bubble players that make it a little bit further too. But I guess they felt he wasn't quite ready. The Edmonton Oilers demoted a bunch, including Xavier Bourgault. Not a big surprise there, but of course, where he was a high pick, somebody that will get a little bit more attention. The Anaheim Ducks demoted defenseman Drew Helleson. Of course, again, not a huge shocker there. But of course, Helleson was a good pickup in a trade. They came over from Colorado on a Josh Manson deal, a pretty highly touted prospect. So again, somebody we'll keep our eye on. The St. Louis Blues also sent back former first-rounder Zachary Bolduc. He goes back to junior, and the Ottawa Senators also send former first-round pick Tyler Boucher. He goes back to the Ottawa 67s to play major junior hockey in the OHL. But I will say that Tyler Boucher did have a pretty good and impressive training camp. Definitely fair to say that we saw some progress. I can't speak for Bolduc because I didn't see him play personally in any of the preseason games or whatever he appeared in. But I know with Boucher I did see a bit, and he looked a lot better. I mean, still a ways to go. One thing, he can definitely shoot the puck. He's definitely not afraid to be physical. There's still some other aspects of his game, though, that certainly need some work. But I can definitely see him being a future regular with the Sens. It might not be a high-profile role, considering all those spots are kind of taken now by some younger players that are all on longer-term deals, so not all, but a good chunk of them. So we'll see how his future goes. But also in Ottawa, too, they also released Michael Dal Colle, who was there on a PTO. He will not be getting a contract. Of course, the former first-round pick of the New York Islanders, probably drafted way too high, but came in with high expectations. Never really materialized in New York. Had a chance in Ottawa, and it's not going to happen. He might be able to get an AHL-only contract, maybe, but I'm not even sure that that's in the cards at this point. The Sens, I thought, might offer him that, but that's not something that they wanted to do. Maybe he'll be heading over to Europe. Hard to say what the future holds for the former first-rounder. Now, on to some other rumors. Now, we have a variety of things. We're going to start with Montreal, because some of the rumors around them kind of go with what we just talked about here with waivers. Now, we know that the Montreal Canadiens want to free up a little bit of cap space. We know that they have way too many forwards. Going into training camp, we expected to see a move, but it's not shocking that it hasn't happened yet, because they obviously wanted time to evaluate. Also gives time for other teams to see some players in some preseason games and give time to make some decisions on what they'd like to do. So no big shocker there, but they have way too many NHL quality forwards on contracts that, something has to give, but they also were dealing with some injuries and stuff. But it's no secret that they wanted to trim down a player or two. Now, I do wonder, but if the future of Juraj Slafkovsky might have an impact on this as well, because I know before the preseason started, Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes both said they really wanted to give Slafkovsky a look early in the season. I mean, they can go and give them that 9-game look before their contract actually kicks in and burns a year. And I thought that it was a good chance that was going to happen. Now that's a little bit uncertain. It's not a guarantee. I mean, Ken Hughes has gone on record to say that he felt Slafkovsky's performance has been, kind of underwhelming here and disappointing. So obviously, they may not feel like he's ready. And if they don't need to waste those games right off the hop. If they really think that going to the American Hockey League is best for this kid. And to be honest, I don't think it's anything he should be ashamed of. I don't think anything that's the fans that should be upset or mad about. The Habs do have a history of rushing prospects. Now, this is all under the old regime, mind you, but they've done it numerous times, time and time again. Now, keep in mind as well, they also haven't had a first overall pick, so a little different quality player, but still, there's no need to rush a player. If they feel he needs the time to develop, they absolutely need to give him that. And the amount of time in hockey that a lot of these players have missed in the last couple of years because of all the COVID stuff, it wouldn't be terrible. Now, I know European players probably didn't miss out as much as North American players. It seems like restrictions over there were a little bit different, at least depending on where they lived, are all, of course, different, and I don't know what it was like where he was at, but I know just generally speaking, it seems to be the case. So we'll see what happens, but his performance and where they want him to go might dictate what they do. If they put him in the American Hockey League and they don't want to open up a spot for him, that might also have an impact here. But there's some that are saying now that if the Montreal Canadiens are having a hard time materializing a trade, maybe we even see a player or two, like a vet, on waivers. And if they could get picked up, get rid of the contract, be great. And if not, they could be buried in the minors and get a little bit of cap relief. And we're looking at the most likely players probably being a guy like Mike Hoffman or Jonathan Drouin. And it's not even so much that they've had a really bad preseason or anything like that. It's a matter of that they just need to make some space. It's just that simple. So the Habs will be an interesting team to watch here. They still have 3 more games with the Ottawa Senators in the preseason. They had a game just last night, and they got 3 more, a couple of which are in neutral territory because they're going to be going on a bit of a road trip here to get a couple of Kraft Hockeyville games in for places that won over the past couple of years. But of course, those games haven't taken place because of COVID. And well, now we'll see, because I believe they have a game in Newfoundland and they have one here in my home province of New Brunswick for a couple of the locations that won those Kraft Hockeyville things that take place every year. So we'll see how they go there. It's expected, I know, probably that's going to be near the end of the preseason, that they very well might have more of an idea what their NHL roster is going to look like. But expect Montreal to be busy and make at least 1 or 2 moves here before the season starts. There's some reports from Aaron Portzline, who covers the Jackets for The Athletic, talking about Jakob Chychrun. Now, the Jackets' name has been mentioned when it comes to NHL insiders like Darren Dreger, talking about at least a group of 6 teams that have been kicking tires on Chychrun. Not to say that all 6 teams are very serious and engaging with serious trade talks. I don't think anything's to that point. The team that we've heard about the most has been Ottawa. They seem to be probably the team that's probably fair to say that have had the most discussions or the most serious discussions, but other teams are in there as well, and the Jackets are one of them. Now, reports from Portsline indicate that back earlier this summer, before the full kind of offseason kind of got kicked into high gear here with the draft and free agency and all that the Jackets were interested at that point as well, and they didn't get the feeling that Chychrun would really want to go to Columbus. Now, keep in mind, Jakob Chychrun does not have trade protection in his contract. He's not old enough to qualify for that. It's one of the terms. However, who wants to acquire a player if they know he doesn't want to be there, right? That's just going to create some toxicity in the dressing room. It's going to create another problem. You might have to move him again. You want the player to be happy and happy to come to your organization. So obviously, in some respects, you kind of want to check on those things before you pull off a deal. And the Jackets were reportedly a team that Chychrun had no interest in because he didn't see them as really being in the right direction, being a playoff team and all that. But now we got Johnny Gaudreau shows up in free agency, and obviously kind of changes things. So Aaron Portzline now is reporting that things appear to have changed a bit, and his stance on the Jackets as a team is certainly not what it used to be. And that if the Jackets were able and willing to pull off a trade for Chychrun, that he feels that Chychrun would be much happier now, knowing what the team has done, going in the right direction than he would have before. So we've heard the name from Dreger and others that they've been in there. I still think the more likely team to pull it off is the Senators, but at the same time, they're never going to pull it off. I don't care if the price doesn't change. That's the big kicker here. They have the assets. They have the connection to the player. I think it's probably the player's first choice, but at the same time, like I said, the player doesn't get all the say here. And at the same time, it's a big price tag, and I don't know if they really want to do that. But don't be surprised if you keep hearing the Jackets' name in the Chychrun rumor mill. Now, on to the Boston Bruins, Calgary Flames. Could we see a deal? I've talked about a deal before, earlier this offseason, that was in the rumor mill. Never happened, obviously, as of yet. Doesn't mean it couldn't at some point. At this point, though, it seems unlikely, but there was some speculation that the Boston Bruins were very interested in bringing back Milan Lucic to the Bruins. Of course, I think, but as I talked about in those videos, I don't know that there was much more to that than probably some Boston media seeing what the Bruins were doing in terms of re-signing Bergeron, bringing back Krejci, and all that. And I think it's more of a bringing the band back together type of thing, and to kind of have one last run, like a last dance type of thing, if you will. And certainly, Lucic was part of that 2011 run that won the Stanley Cup. He was a big part of the Bruins there for a while. And yeah, I think it was just really all that's really all it amounted to. Now, of course, a whole different conversation now. Boston Hockey now has an article suggesting that with the blue line the way it is in Boston and with the blue line the way it is in Calgary, that Don Sweeney should be calling up Brad Treliving and trying to swing a trade. Now, we know the Boston Bruins have coveted defenseman Noah Hanifin since before he was drafted. That is not a secret. Of course, he's from the area. A lot of the Bruins management media would have seen him play lots before the draft. He was a high pick. It's no secret as well at the 2015 draft when Hanifin went, I think he was, 5th overall, I do believe, that they wanted him. And they had 3 consecutive draft picks in the middle part of that first round. And Don Sweeney was new to the job and trying really hard to move up and have a chance to draft this kid, and it never worked out. He ended up keeping his 3 picks, and of course the Bruins often get criticized for those picks because there's lots of other players besides Jake DeBrusk, who's a regular NHL player, lots of players around them that ended up going, like Thomas Chabot, Matthew Barzal, etc., that came even after the Bruins made their 3 consecutive selections. But all that aside, Hanifin, it's been no secret that he's been an interest to them since then, and its name has popped up in the rumor mill multiple times. Even when he was traded from the Hurricanes to the Flames, it's believed the Bruins were kind of interested then, and it's never worked out to get him to Boston. But now we have an expensive crowded blue line in Calgary. If we do see a Mackenzie Weegar extension get pulled off, then I don't know if that's gonna happen this year, because honestly the Flames don't need to rush. A Weegar contract extension wouldn't impact their cap situation until next year. So Calgary does not need to rush into this, but they do have a solid top, elite level blue line here, and moving a defenseman before too far into the future does make sense. Now, the problem is that the Boston Hockey Now article suggested that like maybe Craig Smith and something else to make this happen, and that just to me is absolutely ludicrous. There's no way the Flames are going to take Craig Smith for 1 year, and it'd have to be something else. The something else would have to be like something hardcore, like high up on the list here, and I just don't know what that would be for Boston. So I just don't see that lining up. Now, since that article came out, Calgary Hockey Now has since published an article kind of talking about that article with a rebuttal, so to speak, and basically saying it might have to be something to the point that if David Pastrnak doesn't sign with the Bruins an extension, which we know they're working on, if they don't come to terms and if it gets to the point that Pastrnak becomes a trade piece, that maybe they would consider at that point. But then, of course, you're looking at that's probably too much, right? So the Pastrnak would be, you need more than Hanifin for Pastrnak. Like that's a given, right? But at the same time, Craig Smith is nowhere near enough. So the articles are kind of making suggestions and rebutting each other. And to be honest, it would not surprise me if we get to the point, whether it be later this season, but or probably more likely the offseason, to be honest, because I don't see the Flames feeling like they need to rush to trade a defenseman. They have a incredibly deep blue line, a lot of talent there. Why would they move somebody when they're going to probably try to make a run for it this year and see if they can win a Stanley Cup? But when we get to next year, and of course we only have a $1 million cap increase likely coming, and they're going to have hopefully a Mackenzie Weegar extension lined up, that's going to get expensive and hard to do. If the Bruins come calling for Hanifin, could they work something out? Maybe, but it's not going to be Pastrnak, it's not going to be Smith, and it's going to have to be something in between, likely multiple pieces. Craig Smith is in the final year of his deal. I don't see this deal making sense until, like I said, next offseason. By that point, Craig Smith's a UFA. He's not even in the picture anymore. And the Boston Bruins would have to go down a different road here. But there's no way they're going to trade Pastrnak at that point. But we'll see. I don't see that. As much as I see there being potential for Hanifin and the Bruins, I just don't think that the Bruins have the right pieces right now to really make that work based on what Calgary needs and wants in return. So we'll have to see. But depending on how things go for the Flames, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bruins name linked to Hanifin somewhere down the road later this year or into next offseason, because it seems to always come up. And it probably will until he ever goes there someday, which is hard to say if it'll ever happen. But let me know your thoughts on everything discussed today down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.